I was just standing outside, waiting for a friend, when this woman storms out of her house and accuses me of loitering. She said I looked suspicious, like I didn't belong there. 10 minutes later, the cops showed up. What she didn't know: I owned the mortgage on her house. And that little report she filed? It set off a chain of events neither of us saw coming. This wasn't just a petty feud, it turned into a full-blown war. And by the end of it, we both paid a price. Hey everyone, I'm your host, and before we dive in, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Today's story is wild. It starts with a false police report, and ends with a shocking revelation about who really holds the power in the neighborhood. There's revenge, drama, a major twist halfway through, and a powerful lesson at the end. Let's get into it. It started like any other quiet afternoon in the neighborhood. I had just finished a long client meeting across town and decided to swing by one of the rental properties my company manages. The place was a cozy little home at the end of a cul-de-sac, white porch, blue shutters, neatly trimmed lawn. I was waiting for my maintenance guy, who was running a few minutes late, so I figured I'd step out of the car, stretch my legs, and check out the exterior of the property while I waited. As I stood on the sidewalk, casually scrolling through emails and sipping my coffee, I heard a door creak open behind me. I didn't think much of it at first, neighbors come and go all the time. But then I heard a voice. Sharp, irritated, and clearly aimed at me. "Excuse me? What exactly are you doing here?" I turned to see a woman standing on her porch across the street, arms folded tightly, wearing oversized sunglasses and a bathrobe despite the afternoon sun. She had that unmistakable HOA Karen energy, tight jaw, judging eyes, and the kind of voice that already assumed you were guilty. I raised my coffee cup and gave a polite nod. "Just waiting on someone. Everything okay?" Her lips curled. "You look suspicious. Are you lost?" Suspicious? I was wearing business casual, clean-shaven, and standing on a public sidewalk. I kept calm, trying to de-escalate. "Nope, not lost. I'm with the property management company. Just checking on this house." She narrowed her eyes. "I've lived here 10 years. I know everyone on this street. You don't belong here." There it was. That phrase. You don't belong here. I bit my tongue. There were 1,000 things I could have said, but I didn't want to make a scene. I turned away and walked back to my car, leaning against it while I waited. She didn't stop. I saw her pull out her phone and start dialing. At first, I assumed she was calling her husband or maybe someone from the HOA. But then I heard her say the words out loud. "There's a man loitering in front of my house. He looks like he's casing the neighborhood." I froze. Was she serious? Was I being reported for standing? I didn't even react. I figured it would blow over. But 10 minutes later, a patrol car pulled into the cul-de-sac. And yep, it was for me. The officer stepped out, hand resting near his belt. "Sir, we got a call about suspicious activity. Mind telling me what you're doing here?" I stayed calm, respectful. I explained that I was part of the management team overseeing the house, gave him my ID, business card, and even showed him the property paperwork on my phone. To his credit, the officer was professional. He verified everything and told me I was good to go. No harm done, on paper at least. But the damage was already done. As he pulled away, I looked back at the woman across the street. She was standing at her window, peeking through the blinds like some self-appointed neighborhood watch captain. She thought she'd won. That she'd scared me off or humiliated me. And that's when something clicked. Her house looked familiar. Not the outside, but the address. I'd seen it before. Later that night, I sat down at my laptop and started digging. My firm owns and services dozens of mortgage notes. Basically, we buy distressed properties or handle the loans that banks don't want to deal with anymore. I pulled up our internal portfolio database, typed in the address. And there it was. Bingo. Her mortgage was one of ours. We'd bought it 6 months ago as part of a package from a regional bank. I didn't even know her name until that moment. But now I had the full picture. She didn't just report me. She called the cops. On her landlord. I stared at the screen in disbelief, a swirl of emotions building inside me: anger, shock, even a weird sense of irony. She thought I didn't belong in the neighborhood, but technically, I had more right to be there than she did. She just didn't know it yet. Still, I didn't want to jump into revenge mode. Not yet. I decided to sleep on it. Maybe she'd realize what she did was wrong. Maybe she'd apologize. Spoiler alert. She didn't. The next morning, I got a voicemail from one of our tenant services reps. "Hey, just letting you know, the woman at redacted address called again. She's demanding a new roof and threatening to get legal if we don't fix it immediately. Says her property taxes are too high too." That was the final straw. This wasn't just about her calling the cops anymore. She was arrogant, entitled, and thought she was above everyone else. She had no idea who she was messing with, and I was about to show her. But not in the way you might think. Not yet. Because I had a bigger plan forming. One that would hit her where it hurt. And force her to learn a lesson the hard way. 2 days passed since the incident on that quiet cul-de-sac, and I was still debating how to handle it. Part of me wanted to let it go, to take the high road. After all, she didn't know I was involved with her mortgage, but something about the smugness in her voice, the way she weaponized assumptions and authority, rubbed me the wrong way. But then, things escalated. It was late evening when I got a knock at my front door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I opened it, I was greeted by 2 uniformed officers. One of them stepped forward. "Are you Mr. Walker?" "Yeah." "What's going on?" "We received a report alleging harassment and threats made toward a woman on Willowbrook Drive." My brain scrambled for a second. Harassment? Threats? Then it hit me. Her. She had gone from falsely reporting me to the police for loitering, to now trying to flip the story entirely. And she was bold enough to use my name. "She said I threatened her?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "She reported that you made veiled threats during an interaction earlier this week and that she fears retaliation." I almost laughed, but I caught myself. "Officer, I haven't even spoken to her since that day. I was standing on a sidewalk. She was the one who approached me. I have business there. I manage the property across the street." The other officer glanced at a tablet. "That checks out, and there's no restraining order in place. This is just a report for now. No charges. We just wanted to follow up." I nodded, thanked them for being professional, and closed the door. But my blood was boiling. She wasn't just paranoid. She was trying to build a case against me. Paint me as a threat. Probably so if anything happened down the road, like, say, a foreclosure, she could claim it was personal. And that's when I made my decision. If she wanted to play dirty, I could too. But I'd play smarter. The next day, I sat down with my business partner and our legal advisor. I laid everything out: the false police report, the second complaint, and most importantly, the fact that we held the lien on her property. "She's months behind," my partner confirmed after looking through the payment history. "We sent a final warning last month. She hasn't even responded." "She's got equity," our legal guy added. "If we foreclose, she'll scream. Might try to drag it through court." I nodded. "I don't want her house. I want her to know I could take it. That her entire livelihood sits under paperwork she's never bothered to read." I drafted a letter personally. Professional, legally sound, but sharp. We weren't threatening eviction, but we were reminding her, firmly, that she was in default, and that further inaction would result in accelerated foreclosure proceedings. The letter was sent through certified mail. I knew she'd get it. 3 days later, I got a voicemail from her. Her voice, which was so bold and biting before, now sounded fragile, defensive. "Hi, this is, Michelle from Willowbrook Drive. I got a letter from your company about the mortgage. I didn't realize you were involved. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Maybe we could talk?" It was subtle, but I heard it. Panic. She was starting to connect the dots. The guy she tried to get arrested was one of the people who could take her house away. I didn't respond. Not right away. A week passed. No payments from her, but she did what people like her always do. She ran to the HOA for backup. I got an official email from the HOA board stating that a tenant has reported harassment from a representative of your company, and they were requesting that no further contact be made without a legal intermediary. So now they were trying to freeze me out of the neighborhood? I almost admired her persistence. Almost. Then came the third blow, this time from a different angle. Out of nowhere, my company's business page online started getting one-star reviews. Unethical, rude management, harasses tenants. They all came within 48 hours of each other. I traced the usernames. Some were obviously fake, others were names from her neighborhood. Michelle was organizing a smear campaign. She hadn't apologized. She hadn't paid her mortgage. But she was trying to destroy my reputation. It was war now. But again, I didn't lash out. I didn't post rants. I didn't reply to the reviews. I went back to the documents. She had violated 3 terms of her mortgage agreement, including property maintenance standards and failure to respond to notices. That was enough to justify legal proceedings. But more importantly, she was renting out the guest unit behind her house, without disclosing it to the mortgage holder. A clear breach of her loan terms. Now I had leverage. I filed a formal notice of breach and scheduled a mediation hearing. But instead of sending it through lawyers or email, I delivered it the old-fashioned way, hand-delivered by a courier, mid-afternoon, in full view of her and her neighbors. The envelope was stamped final notice, mediation required. Let her feel it. That day, I drove past the house again. I wasn't loitering this time. I had a reason to be there. She stood on the porch as I passed. We made eye contact. This time, no sunglasses. No fake confidence. Just silence. She knew. And that's when it hit me. I didn't need to take her house. I just needed her to understand who held the keys. But she wasn't finished either. Because what she did next? Well, it nearly cost me everything. And I never saw it coming. The moment our eyes locked that day, it was clear Michelle finally understood the position she was in. But I also knew something else. People like her don't go down quietly. She wouldn't just accept it. She'd scheme, claw, spin something back around. And right on cue, 3 days later, I got hit with a certified letter of my own. It was a formal notice of civil complaint. Michelle had filed a harassment and defamation suit against me personally, claiming I was abusing my financial position to intimidate and emotionally distress a private homeowner. I had to read it twice. She was suing me. The complaint was weak, my legal team called it. Paper thin with a splash of drama. But the timing was strategic. She filed it the same day we were preparing mediation paperwork for her foreclosure notice. It wasn't about winning, it was about stalling. A lawsuit meant delays. It meant we had to pause everything. Smart. Dirty but smart. And just like that, the upper hand I thought I had started slipping. The court scheduled a hearing 3 weeks out. Until then, we had to freeze the foreclosure process. That gave her time, and she used every minute of it to go on the offensive. The HOA got involved again. Suddenly, I was getting notices about my company vehicles parked too long on Willowbrook Drive. Notices about landscaping violations for our property. Even the local neighborhood Facebook group turned into a feeding frenzy. People I'd never met were calling me a corporate predator, saying I was trying to evict a single woman out of greed. Michelle had spun the entire narrative, twisting the truth, leaning into victimhood, and painting me as some faceless villain. But here's the irony. I never wanted her house. I didn't even want to evict her. All I wanted was accountability. Respect. Maybe even an apology. But instead, she turned it into a circus. I spent those 3 weeks tightening my case. I gathered the original 911 report she filed against me, my clean interaction with the officers, the fake reviews, the proof she violated her mortgage terms, and even screenshots from the Facebook group where she rallied neighbors with lies. But I also dug deeper. And that's when I found the crack in her armor. The plot twist: she didn't even own the house. Well, technically she did. But not alone. When I reviewed the original mortgage file again, I noticed a second name on the paperwork: Daniel Weber. Co-signer. Her ex-husband. Digging a little more, I found that Daniel had relocated to Oregon after the divorce. Quiet guy, veteran, with zero drama attached to his name. I reached out to him. At first, he was cautious, but when I explained what was going on, and that his name was still legally bound to the property, he got concerned. Michelle had stopped paying the mortgage months ago, and if the house defaulted, his credit would take a hit too. Daniel agreed to cooperate. Within days, he submitted a formal statement backing my claims, confirming that Michelle had taken overpayments after the divorce but never refinanced in her name alone. She hadn't even told him she was renting out the guest unit illegally. The best part? Daniel authorized us to proceed with foreclosure on his behalf. Suddenly, Michelle's entire defense crumbled. She couldn't cry harassment anymore. She couldn't weaponize the lawsuit or stall the mediation, because her own co-owner had flipped. And just like that, the power shifted back. When the court date finally arrived, Michelle showed up in full Karen mode, overdressed, dramatic, flanked by some no-name lawyer she clearly couldn't afford long-term. I sat across the room, calm, collected, and backed by documentation, receipts, and Daniel's signed affidavit. Her case didn't last 10 minutes. The judge dismissed the harassment claim, declared no merit for defamation, and sternly warned her against misusing the court system. But that wasn't the end. After the hearing, I caught a glimpse of her outside the courthouse, standing alone, face pale, jaw tight. Her lawyer had already walked off. The same neighbors she'd rallied were nowhere in sight. She glared at me. "You planned all this," she snapped. "You waited until I made a mistake." I didn't say much. I just replied, "No. You just assumed I didn't belong." Then I walked away. That should have been the end of it. But Michelle still had one move left. One final punch to throw before the dust could settle. And this time, it almost worked. Because when I got home that night, I found something taped to my front door. A notice from Child Protective Services. Apparently, someone had filed an anonymous report accusing me of leaving my 8-year-old son unsupervised while I harassed tenants. It was bogus. My kid had been at summer camp all week. But the fact that someone went that far? That personal? I knew exactly who it was. She couldn't win in court. She couldn't stop the foreclosure. So now, she was going after my family. And that's when I snapped. It was no longer just about legal action. This had become psychological warfare. But now, it was time to finish it. There's a line most people won't cross, even when they're angry, even when they're losing. Michelle leaped over it without hesitation. The CPS visit was the final confirmation. This wasn't just some bitter neighbor drama anymore. She was willing to destroy my family, my business, and my reputation, all because I had dared to stand my ground. When the social worker came to the door, I remained calm. I had documentation proving where my son was, signed camp drop-off logs, messages from staff, even time-stamped photos. The worker was polite, clearly just following protocol, and after 15 minutes she nodded and said, "I'm really sorry we had to do this. Everything looks fine here." But I wasn't fine. I was furious. This wasn't a warning shot, it was a declaration of war. I called my lawyer that night and told him to proceed with every option available to protect my name and business. But Michelle had already moved on to the next phase of her campaign. The very next morning, I woke up to 10 new 1-star reviews on Google, Yelp, and Zillow. They weren't just vague, each review was detailed with fake stories. Tried to evict my grandmother after she paid on time. Refused to fix plumbing and told us to deal with it. Scammer. Don't trust this guy. He's all about intimidation. Some were clearly copied and pasted. Others even used my full name, trying to make it personal. She was trying to burn my business to the ground, digitally. I checked the review timelines. Most were made between 1:30 a.m. and 3 a.m. Classic move, keyboard war while the world sleeps. At first, I considered reporting the reviews individually. But I knew that would be a waste of time. It could take days, sometimes weeks for platforms to act, and the damage would already be done. So I did what I do best, dug deeper. Using a third-party digital forensics service, I tracked IP data linked to some of the anonymous reviews. I couldn't get full names, but guess what? 3 of the IPs matched devices in Michelle's household. And one was traced to the HOA community center, where Michelle was rumored to spend hours using their public computer. I was building a case of cyber harassment, bulletproof and backed with timestamps, IP logs, and statements from multiple clients who'd also been contacted by someone, asking if I was trustworthy. She was relentless. One of my longtime renters even forwarded me an email from a Gmail account named tenantwatchdog@gmail.com, warning them about me. Guess who the writing style matched? But even as I built my defense, she wasn't done. She went after my vendors. I received emails from 2 different contractors who do regular work for our company, plumbers and electricians we subcontract for properties. Both said they'd been contacted by someone claiming our firm was under investigation for illegal housing practices. She said she was a journalist. One of them told me. She was playing all sides, neighborhood gossip, digital warfare, legal stalling, and now pretending to be the press? At this point, it wasn't just about retaliation anymore. Michelle was unraveling. She was trying to take me down any way she could. And honestly, it started to work. I lost a small client who had been on the fence about renewing their contract with us. I got fewer phone inquiries that week than usual. Even a couple of old friends asked me, "Hey, everything okay with your business? I saw some weird stuff online." The smear campaign was bleeding into reality. But what she didn't realize was, I'd already set my trap. Remember Daniel? Her ex-husband and co-signer? After he gave us legal permission to act, we filed a formal notice of foreclosure, with his name attached. It wasn't just a formality now. It was a fully legal action, backed by a co-owner and triggered by contract breaches. Michelle received the notice on a Friday. By Monday, she showed up at my office. She didn't come to fight. She came to beg. I was in the middle of reviewing paperwork when my receptionist buzzed me. There's a Michelle here. Says she wants to speak with you." I told her to let Michelle wait. 10 minutes. 15. I made her stew. Then I walked out and greeted her with complete composure. She stood up immediately. Gone were the sunglasses, the passive-aggressive smirk, and the arrogant posture. She looked drained, pale, and strangely polite. "I didn't know what I was getting into," she started. "I just felt scared. Like I was being targeted." I let her speak. She admitted to filing the first police report. She danced around the fake reviews and the CPS report, never confirming, but not denying either. She said the lawsuit was just to buy time. And then came the line that really hit me. "I thought if I made you the bad guy first, no one would believe you when you came after me." There it was. Her entire strategy, laid bare. Attack first. Control the narrative. Weaponize the court of public opinion. She didn't even care if it was true. She just didn't want to be the villain in her story. I sat back and said nothing for a long moment. Then I leaned forward. "I don't want your house. I never did. But I won't let you ruin people because you think you're the only one who matters." She looked down. "I'll leave," she said quietly. "If I sign it over to Daniel, will you stop?" That wasn't up to me anymore. It was up to Daniel, and the legal process was already rolling. But I nodded. "If you walk away clean, and stop all of this, it doesn't have to go further." She agreed. And just like that, the storm she'd built started to fade. But here's the thing. Even though I won, legally, financially, and reputationally, I didn't feel victorious. I just felt tired. Michelle had burned her own bridges in trying to destroy mine. She'd lost her home, her community, and her standing, all because she couldn't stand being challenged. And me? I realized something deeper. This war didn't start because of business. It started because of judgment. She looked at me standing on a sidewalk and decided I didn't belong. Everything that followed was built on that single assumption. After Michelle walked out of my office, the entire situation felt eerily quiet. No angry emails. No fake reviews. No HOA threats. Just silence. She never showed up to fight the foreclosure. Never filed another complaint. Within 2 weeks, she'd officially signed over her portion of the property rights to Daniel, who promptly put the house up for sale. He told me he didn't want to deal with the mess anymore. Can't say I blamed him. The house sold fast, honestly faster than I expected. It was in a good location, and once Michelle was out of the picture, interest in the listing picked up. That guest unit in the back? Someone turned it into a charming Airbnb within a month. It became a quiet, happy space again. But I wasn't exactly celebrating. Even though I had won, I couldn't ignore the emotional toll it had taken on me, and on others. I wasn't some vengeful villain trying to snatch houses out from under people. I was just a guy trying to manage properties, raise a kid, and not get arrested for standing on a sidewalk. Michelle had made me out to be a monster. And I'd fought back, not with fists, but with facts, paperwork, and patience. Still, it didn't feel good watching someone spiral like that, even if she'd done it to herself. And yet, that was part of the lesson. A few weeks after the sale, something unexpected happened. I was walking my dog near the edge of the same neighborhood when I saw her again, Michelle. She was sitting alone at an outdoor cafe, nursing a cup of tea and staring into space. She looked different. Not angry. Not smug. Just tired. Human. I wasn't going to say anything. I figured she wouldn't want to see me, but she looked up, and we locked eyes for a second. She didn't scowl. She didn't look away. She nodded. Just a simple, weary nod. I nodded back. That was the last time I ever saw her. Later that night, I found myself reflecting on everything, how a single accusation, born from judgment and ignorance, had snowballed into a war that nearly consumed both of us. I kept asking myself, what if I had reacted differently at the beginning? What if she had? But deep down, I knew, it wasn't just about that day on the sidewalk. It was about how people like Michelle see the world. She didn't see me as a property manager or a professional that day. She saw someone who didn't belong. Someone she didn't recognize. And that made me a threat in her mind. That small assumption, combined with a lack of accountability, turned into a full-blown campaign of lies, manipulation, and retaliation. I also learned something about myself. I'd always thought of myself as calm and logical. But this whole ordeal had pushed me to the edge. I found myself obsessing over revenge, digging through records late at night, building counterattacks like it was chess. And when she targeted my family, that's when I truly lost myself for a moment. It made me realize how quickly a person can become what they hate, even in the name of justice. A few days later, I had lunch with Daniel, the ex-husband. He was in town finalizing the paperwork from the house sale, and we grabbed burgers at a local spot. I thanked him again for stepping in. He shook his head. I stayed out of it for too long. Michelle always had a temper, but I thought maybe she'd mellow out. Clearly not. What do you think she'll do next? I asked. He shrugged. I don't know. Probably try to start over somewhere smaller. Maybe that's what she needs. He paused. You know, she really believed you were dangerous. I think part of her wanted to believe it, just to justify her behavior. I nodded. She's not the only one who builds their reality around fear. The next weekend, I sat down to talk with my son about everything. I kept it simple, no need for legal jargon or character assassination. Just the truth. There was someone who didn't like me, I said. They tried to cause trouble, but we stayed calm and handled it the right way. He looked at me and asked, "Are you mad at them?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "Not anymore. Sometimes people act out because they're scared or don't understand. But that doesn't mean we have to become like them." That was the moment I realized how this story would end. Not with gloating, not with revenge, but with a decision. A choice to let go. So, what's the lesson here? Don't judge people by how they look, or where they're standing, or what you think they're doing. And if you're in a position of power, financial, legal, or otherwise, don't abuse it. But don't let people walk all over you either. There's a fine line between standing your ground and burning down everything in your path. Both Michelle and I crossed that line. And in the end, either of us walked away unscathed. But we did walk away. And sometimes, that's the best you can do.